I need to cater to the multiple opportunities of diversity, relook at budgeting and resourcing. Big focus of ours is to reduce teacher workload or that cognitive workload by using simple technologies that they can focus on the stuff that they love doing with the kids.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Xuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. Today on Around the School Table, we're joined by Brent Passchier, Associate Principal at Atwell College in Western Australia. Brent's been leading the way in inclusive education, showing how schools can support a growing number of students with diverse needs without simply adding more staff. Through initiatives like sensory rooms, hydrotherapy and music programs, alongside smart use of technology, he and his team are reshaping what inclusion looks like in everyday classrooms. And in this chat, we'll be exploring how these approaches not only help students with disabilities thrive, but also enrich learning for everyone. Brent, welcome to Around the School Table.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you met the Xuno Suite team at the Australian Association of Special Education conference in Melbourne recently.
I did.
You were talking on inclusive education. What were some of the core ideas and the takeaways that you hope to communicate about what real inclusion looks like in practice?
I suppose as we evolve in communication, and it is no secret that there is definitely involvement occurring across the nation, the level of diversity that is occurring or co-occurring in different states and whatnot is exceptional. The long gone are the days of the tick box of I've got 30 kids in a room and the one Johnny boy that doesn't seem to listen. And nowadays it is actually I need to cater to the multiple opportunities of diversity. So how do we actually do that? How do we do that without sort of breaking the budget of resources? How do we do that without going, oh my goodness, we need more hands on deck? And what does it actually look like in terms of valued schooling for the child? To be in a class, to be in a program, to be engaging with an adult. So what I presented on or spoke about at that ACE conference as well was, some of the things that we've done to sort of break down barriers, some of the things that we've done to sort of relook at budgeting and resourcing to, I suppose, extend the dollar and or get more value out of the dollar. And a big focus of ours is to reduce teacher workload or that cognitive workload that comes with it. And by using simple technologies, I suppose, streamlining the admin practices and processes so that they can focus on the stuff that they love doing with the kids, because I would be hard-pressed to think that any teacher in the country is doing it for the paycheck. I dare say that they are all doing it because they have a passion. One thing I am very passionate in that space, but yeah, how do we make sure that passion's not lost from admin load? And how do we make sure that the kids get the benefit of that passion as well?
So with some of those things you're talking about, it's more a mindset shift rather than just throwing extra beans.
Yeah, that's right. There's this growing, I suppose, this growing notion that inclusive education or high-level differentiation means more work. It's going to be tougher. I need to do more. And what we've said is it's not about creating more work. It is about going back to basics and finding value back in the things that we do well, and ensuring that we're just targeting it to the needs of the child, as opposed to, hey, yes, you do this one program, fantastic, but you've now only made it appropriate for 10 students, which used to be 30 kids, but now it's only 10 students in the class and we've forgotten about the other 20. So what we're doing is trying to support teachers and trying to support educators about going, please don't do more. Please get back in touch with what you found the value of passion in teaching. And and let's focus on that. Let's use evidence-informed practices. Let's use technologies to be able to support you do the admin load and make sure that we're getting back to the basics.
Let's tease that out just a little bit more, because you've seen your number of students with individual disability allocations grow from, I think it's just over 90 to about 150.
Correct.
But your education assistance staffing has remained the same. So this probably is a good way to illustrate how you meet those increased needs without increasing headcount.
Yeah, and fantastic. And straight on a bit of paper, I know that there will be people listening going, oh my goodness, those poor EAs, in terms of how do they handle that said workload. Look, the culture that's been driven from where we were at with that sort of 90 to 100 and to where we are now has been exponentially positive, which is fantastic. And the needs of the children are being more and more catered to. I think what we've tried to do is, instead of having the mentality of more hands means less work, we're taking the approach of having valued hands or more experienced hands is about creating more opportunities for our students to actually engage in programs. So once upon a time, we would operate what you might see as a traditional ed support classroom with 6 to 8 kids in it, with 1 teaching staff and 3 EAs. Now is a classroom with 8 to 10 students in it and 1 teaching staff and 3 EAs. Now, of that as well, whilst we've increased the size of that physical classroom, we've actually created more opportunities for those kids to go break into small groups and go and access more tailored learning opportunities. So, for example, writing it into the curriculum that they're going to have their sensory and engagement time, writing it into the curriculum that they are going to have small group literacy, or they're going to do small group works on hydrotherapy, life skills, whatever it might be. The idea is that instead of increasing the number of EAs or teachers that are involved in that, what we've done is divide and conquer, I suppose. We've taken the EA that would traditionally be in the class and actually moved them into running that small group tuition. So they're currently supporting a small group, facilitating an exceptionally important program, and doing it with, say, 2 or 3 children at a time, which then also reduces the load on the teacher back at the classroom with those kids and those other EAs too. So the more opportunity to move around. And I suppose that hits one of our core values here is that access to opportunity. And that's one of the driving points for inclusive education of what I personally see as important.
So, to be fair, for someone thinking, well, hang on, is this a magic trick? I mean, there has been investment. I mean, the sensory rooms, the hydrotherapy, the music programs, but it's a different way you've approached it so that you've got the ability for what you just laid out. Is that?
Yeah, correct. So, for example, the biggest financial, I suppose, burden, or the biggest financial tool that ends up using is FTE. It goes on wage. What we've tried to do is going, okay, how do we ensure that people are coming into work, they are invested in what they are doing, they are working on high quality programs, they have got value for their work, they've got value for the kids, and the kids have got more opportunities to engage in high value programs for themselves. So instead of spending the money on, okay, I need another 10 EAs or 20 EAs or whatever it is, we've gone, okay, we don't have the extra staff member. However, we shift this staff member over to here. We then have the leftover money to invest in the actual specific program, the tool, the resource, the environment, the whatever it might be. That creates that access to opportunity. And I suppose, the big difference. Instead of going, okay, you've got these particular needs, you fit in this box, we've said, right, you've got these particular needs, what doors can we open to ensure that we can sort of drive it home for success, and what does successful learning look like for child A versus child B? And then backing that by the incredible staff. I will brag about the staff until the cows come home. I'm very fortunate in that space. But yeah, we've got a long-term investment into our staff and making sure that they're valued.
So Atwell College is fully integrated, is how it's described. Students with and without disabilities are learning side by side. How do we design, or how do you design that integration in a way that works for students and teachers? What's it like at classroom level?
If I said there was a blueprint for design, that was a one set, that would be amazing. I don't think that exists. I think it needs to be done on school by school basis. But look, how it works here at Atwell College. So we host what's referred to as an endorsed education support program. So you might have schools that have specialist programs in music or phys ed, doing footy or STEM or whatever it might be. Think the same vein, but for education support. And the idea is that we are a one-stop shop. We've got kids in that high needs palliative care state, those kids that are on full-time oxygen, require high-level medical interventions, those kids that we are looking at progressing lives beyond, hopefully, to the end of year 12, all the way through to kids that are actually fully engaged into and I say in air quotes, that mainstream traditional curriculum setting where they're working at academic rigour for their age group and got a diagnosis of autism. We have kids at the moment that are going to get some of the top ATAR scores that this state will see and diagnosed with autism. So we cater full spectrum. I suppose what that looks like by design is making sure that we cater to the individual needs of the child. I don't grab Johnny boy who has non-verbal, high-level medical needs and say, hey, great, Johnny, you're going to go jump into this ATAR level mathematics class, when Johnny actually requires a level of intervention for sensory integration or interoception practices. Okay, well, let's build that into his curriculum because that's what value looks like for Johnny versus Jane, who wants to be the next top astronomer. Okay, what do we need to put in place to ensure that Jane's needs are being met so that she can work on that pathway? So in terms of Atwell College, if I could simply break it down, we've got, I suppose, 3 pathways overall. We refer to our C pathway, our U pathway, and our whole school pathway. So our C pathway, centralised learning, and that is for those students that are requiring a higher level of intervention, whether it be through physical, social, and emotional learning, sensory integrations, therapy requirements, medical, all that sort of stuff, higher level of communication needs there as well. We've also got our universal pathway. Now, these classrooms are sort of dotted around the school, and think of it as a bit of a home base to get those mesh subjects ticked off, your maths, your English, a lot of focus on personal social capabilities, protective behaviours, and they would get that home base, but they would actually then engage in the electives programs in the mainstream classrooms. So your visual arts, your woodwork, your phys ed, your drama, tends to be, a lot of the kids love drama, digitech, whatever it might be. And the idea is that some of those education assistants that would support them in that home base then would divide and conquer and then support the smaller groupings that go out into those mainstream classes. And then that last sort of pathway is, like I said, those kids that are sort of working at that typical academic rigour for their year group, fully immersed into the mainstream class or the traditional sense of curriculum, but they do have that diagnosis of, say, autism. So what are we doing in there? So we've got 6 inclusive EAs that basically scout throughout the whole college and support those kids on needs basis, whether it be 15-minute check-in in English versus a 60-minute intervention in mathematics because they do amazing in English but have higher levels of challenges in mathematics, or it's unstructured times, or whatever it might be. But yeah, we use a fair bit of tech in terms of, I wouldn't say it's difficult technology, but we do a lot of investment in technology to evidence this and to data drive how we're using our FTE and where the kids' needs are and how those can change.
You did say kids seem to like drama, and you are talking to one. I did drama in year 12 in South Australia. The first time it was ever offered at matriculation level, I was in there.
Fantastic.
And I loved it, absolutely. It was 1 boy and 17 girls. Just such a joyful year. But I have to ask, you might have, say, 4 to 8 students who have disability allocations. They're in a, inverted commas, mainstream class grouping. What's been most effective, have you found, in building the confidence and the capacity among your staff to run a scenario like that?
So, like I said, in terms of the education assistance supports, so they might come from that home-based setting and then go through. So we might have, say, two of the EAs go through and support those 5 to 8 kids in performing arts or music or whatever it might be as well. And they are key in terms of that, supporting that level of differentiation that occurs, whether it be curriculum-based. The other thing is for the teachers, and it is a really hard thing to do because teachers love to just see kids grow and they want to be able to apply the best. But a big thing has been a driver for is, why is that child attending in the first place? Are they attending for shoving sort of content at them, or are they attending because it's another opportunity for them to engage in pro-social skills, to engage in another type of stimulus that supports them dealing with some of their own challenges that they might be facing? Is it an opportunity for the other kids in that classroom to demonstrate how to work with diverse needs as well, whether it be in peer interactions? So we look at the actual value of what the child is getting out of that particular set classroom, not just as in a content lesson, but as, yes, content lessons, but okay, what are the peer interactions? What does small group work look like? What are the challenges look like in terms of there's an assessment coming up and, okay, what's actually required from you? Do you get the whole level of the assessment, or are you getting the opportunity to do the PowerPoint because you love doing PowerPoints and whatnot, and that is okay? Because again, we're not looking at can Johnny demonstrate that he's a proficient new music professor, but are we looking at the fact that Johnny has struggled with doing partner-based work, but he really loves music, and this particular project involves a little bit of partner-based work, so we can use that to sort of break that barrier and solutions, some opportunities for Johnny to access that opportunity to a successful outcome versus a not so successful outcome. The other thing is we've also got our ed support teachers that operate those home bases. And they're going to kill me for saying this. They're on call. They're on call. The idea that we've got and I hold my hands up here, a mainstream teacher and an ed support teacher the idea is that they should be able to call on each other to ask for supports, and it goes both ways. So if there's an implementation of content, and how do we differentiate it? What does that look like in that classroom? And that teacher being able to support the mainstream teacher to go, well, actually, we've had some success doing it this way in the class, and vice versa. The ed support teacher going to a mainstream teacher and going, I really need Johnny to have more opportunities to actually do some peer-to-peer work with kids that also love music, because all his mates in class, music's not their thing. So we want to see it go both ways. Now, don't get me wrong. I would be remiss to say that every single teacher is nailed it every single time. That's not the idea. The idea is that disability and inclusion is not really going anywhere. It is only going to become more profound, more integrated, and more diverse. So the idea is that whilst we have these challenges, whilst we have the opportunities to engage with each other, and whilst we've got the mindset to look at value for the child, why not use those opportunities to continually do the trial and error and have a look at evidence-informed practices and invest in the programs and invest in the value of the people that we've currently got to provide higher quality educational programs for our kids.
Still juggling forms the old-fashioned way? Say hello to Student Forms by Xuno. You can create, collect, and manage all your student forms online in one simple, secure platform. Save time, stay organised, and quick access everything you need anytime. Visit xuno.com.au and see how Student Forms by Xuno can work for your school.
Something I just want to shine a torch on that you mentioned just in passing about there's also a role for support from a child's peers It's not just the teachers.
No.
I was listening to an interview with Colin Fisher, who's an organisational behaviour scholar, and in a throwaway line, he talked about how they did research into headhunting high performers, and if they brought them by themselves, it was a hard slog, but they brought them with their team, it went on well. And it just, the way you mentioned that, am I over-egging it to say it is an all-of-classroom endeavour? And is it right to say that maybe sometimes we're focusing just on the paid people in that room?
Yeah. So, and that's a big thing as well. I've always said that the kids here, the challenges that we've got, 99% of the time, it's not anything to do with the child. It's just got to do with the system or the process or the planning or the administrative load or whatever it might be there. So if we can tick those boxes, the kids usually are the best advocates for each other. We do some exceptional practices here in terms of what it looks like for building up some of our more able students to advocate and present and support some of our kids that are unable to do that. For example, we've got our Year 12 ATAR health class. They run a health expo, a whole day health expo, and it is part of their course markings. They will actually go through and set up a full table set suites of activities for our students in that sort of centralised pathway to come and engage with, whether it be on health and hygiene, healthy eating, protective behaviours, safety in the community, e-safety, slip, slop and slap for sunscreen, whatever it might be. They go through and provide that. Now, dare to say, that gets better and better every single year. It is exceptional. The amount of differentiation, they hold value in recognising that they've got to communicate differently, whether it be with AAC or AODs, high-tech, low-tech, verbal, keyword sign, whatever it might be, all the way through to the idea that they've started putting in place sensory spaces on all spots or quiet times because they recognise that some students can engage for 10 minutes, fully integrated, and some kids just can't. So what does it look like for short, sharp opportunities to engage in an activity, chunking the learning? They're doing all the stuff that we practice as teachers to do, and they're just naturally doing it because they're also a kid and they also know what it's like to not have some of those things. But yeah, I'll brag to the cows come home about how well our students do in terms of not just including our students, but actually catering to the needs of our kids. And that's sort of stuff that we want to replicate, but in a more formative process and on a larger scale, right? We go, yes, the Health Expo, we've got and Net Set Go teams, which for phys ed we do in terms of home economics, and we've got cert course students that come through and actually do some of their practical hours in the building and read books to kids. And that's what inclusion looks like for us. It's not you're this diagnosis, which means you go in that box, and you don't have this diagnosis, you go into the other box. It's here's a child with particular skill sets and needs. Let's cater to the needs and utilise their skill sets. And here's another child that has different needs and different skill sets. So let's utilise those skill sets and cater to those needs.
Within this realm, there's this thing called generalised adjustments.
Yep.
And they could be things like extra time for a task, for example. Yep. What are a few other examples?
So there's a big thing. So and this is the thing, all teachers are actually very well aware of this sort of stuff. Whether they're cognitively aware or whether or not they know which way to put it in practice, the generalised adjustments are the things that we do day to day to ensure that the child has an equitable access to their learning. So it might be that I'm going to sit Johnny toward the front of the room because I know at the back of the room he has a hearing impairment and it doesn't always come across as clearly. Or I need to make sure that when I'm handing out ready for note tasks time, I'm actually using a template so that they're filling in the blanks and not just writing on into a written bit of paper because Johnny has dyslexia or dysgraphia or whatever it might be. And so I'm catering to that particular need. The idea is, how do we present the generalised adjustments for high quality teaching so that those kids can get back to the same level and be on the same playing field as the child that has, higher skill sets in those areas and doesn't require that sort of stuff.
And in that mix, there's a use of QR codes to also help reduce the stress for teachers and students in, I guess, accessing those general adjustments. How does that work?
Yeah, so we've also got adjustments for timed assessments as well, and the hardest thing for a teacher, and by golly, it is hard, is to go, I've got a class of 28 kids, I've got an assessment coming in up in 2 weeks' time, and out of those 28 kids, 6 of them require some sort of specific timed assessment adjustment, which is SCARS set approved, and a whole bunch of other stuff in terms of evidence collation. How do I know what pairs to what student and where do I go for it? Again, that admin load. What we've done is just create a very simple QR code, and it's got about 3 or 4 questions, which basically states, what's the assessment on, when is it, and which class is involved. So that gets put to one of our lead EAs that we've got here, known as an adjustment officer. They actually have a look at the class code, identify the students, against one of our matrix that we've got. She's able to specifically label out exactly what adjustments the child is entitled to, and what best measure of success could look like for them to access the assessment. That goes into a calendar invite. The teacher gets included, the student, and one of our inclusive EAs as the supervisor for that assessment, and it's sent off. So the teacher has had to do no more than scan the QR code, take 30 seconds to answer 3 or 4 questions. The child's needs get met. They actually get an equitable access to an assessment. Their outcomes are better. We get evidence to showcase, hey, look, this is how successful this child can be with these interventions in place. It's a bit of a win-win around, I suppose.
Wow. I want to start drawing us towards the end with just a couple of questions that are perhaps at the more general level, tapping into some of the deeper whys and motivations and just the thinking level here. You have often challenged the assumption that inclusion means more work for teachers.
Yeah.
I guess we've been nibbling around this area, but what are some small practical adjustments that actually make inclusion manageable and beneficial for everyone?
I suppose one of the biggest things, and I mentioned it before, and look, there's a Dr. Matt Capp. He's fantastic. He's Queensland set based, and he does a lot of work in this space. But teachers want the best for their kids, and absolutely, and often they can get caught up with investing quite a fair amount of time into establishing high quality curriculum and or navigating high quality curriculum, and going overboard with it. Unfortunately, what it does mean is that it unintentionally raises barriers as soon as you get those levels of those other kids with diverse needs coming in to go, okay, it's great you want them to do this program, but they can't actually access that in a particular way or your particular way. Where is it actually said that they're required to access it in that particular way? Because that's not part of the assessment or part of the curriculum. The content of learning is, yes, but not how it's being presented. So what we're trying to say is take the step back, actually have a look at how it's being presented or what parts are being presented. And again, what is the value of the learning for the child? So when that child walks in and says, I've got to go and do the next science assessment, or I'm going to engage in music and I've got autism and it's extremely loud, or whatever it might be, and we go, here's content. Are we actually taking a step back and going, how is that content delivered, and how are we going above and beyond for the smaller percentage of the classroom and completely forgetting that there are the other students, which then creates more work? Or are we actually taking a step back and going, hang on a second, here is a set of groundwork that can be applied to any student in this room, irrespective of need, and then growing it from there. I suppose the other thing is the workload often falls to that, like I said, that administrative task. How am I going to write my traditional set lesson plan, or my reporting, or what my reporting style? we're coming up with innovative ways, I should say, to be able to do that. Something as simple as going on and selecting an overarching objective. I don't want them to then spend the next 6 hours going through and having to break that objective down into 20 different SMART goals of a hierarchy nature that are going to cover every part of that objective under its umbrella. So we've developed all the goals that are associated with all the objectives that you could possibly think of from, say, able stage A all the way through to year 6. And we've gone, okay, here's a bank of those goals already done for you, and this is how you can select them to make it easier. And here's some programs and accessibility or differentiation ways to be able to embed them in your class practice. So, unfortunately, I'm out of the teaching realm in terms of classroom practice. I'm in an administrative role as being the associate principal here. So I can handle a lot of that admin load, and I will develop a lot of that. And then I'll give you guys the opportunity to actually focus back on the stuff that you love doing, driving home the passion behind why you became an art teacher, a music teacher, a science teacher, or whatever it might be. That's the goal. Inclusion doesn't mean more work. It means having higher value about the right work, or putting more value into the right work.
So on that then, if there happens to be a school teacher listening who is still hesitant about going, inverted commas, all in on inclusion, could you just finish off by giving us a vision of what a truly inclusive school system looks like to you, not just in terms of structure, but culture, belief? What is your take on that?
The cultural belief for myself is inclusion doesn't mean grabbing Johnny, who's autistic, who struggles with peer or social skills, and shoving them into the mainstream class of mathematics, science, or whatever it might be. What it does mean, though, is developing or creating environments, learning programs. It means providing access to opportunity for Johnny to actually engage in some way that is successful and valuable for himself, the same as what we would do for any other child. We have kids that are gifted and talented and exceptional in terms of academics, and we quite literally take them from a generalized pathway and then provide them with more challenging content work so that we can grow them further. But we don't necessarily do it the other way around. That is what inclusion looks like, is the access to opportunity. Instead of just taking the child and shoving them in and going, hey, you're the square peg, you will be forced through the round hole, or we will chisel you down to a round peg, can we actually have a look at hey, yes, we've got a square peg and a round hole, but now we've also got a square hole and a triangle hole and a rectangular hole, or whatever it might be. And it is alongside every other opportunity that every other kid has. We recess unstructured times. We have all of our kids engaged in the unstructured environment of recess, the lining up for the cafe, the kicking the footy at lunch, the playing the basketball. 9 times out of 10, our guys are actually fully immersed with their year groups and engaging with peer, and then they go to their timetable classes, which may or may not be an ATAR pathway. It may be a general, it may be an elective, it may be the ed support room. Inclusion isn't about shoving them all into a room together. Inclusion is about providing them the access to the opportunity to be able to do that if it means value for that child. That's the difference.
I never thought of queuing up for a cafe as being something with virtue.
Yeah. I don't like queuing. I go on supervision there, and it's.
But even so, it is a life skill.
It is a life skill. There's something as simple as, and we've had to have the progression. Long gone are the days where I used to be able to bring a 50-cent coin and get a cheesy down at the canteen, and now everyone's just going on PayPass. And now there's multiple lines. We can differentiate the fact that we've gone, hey, you've got cash and you've got card. and we've got a student in a wheelchair and we put a ramp in place, and then we've got a student with an unseen diagnosis, and we go, actually just join into wherever you might want to fit in. And we're going, hang on a second, actually, there's another pathway, or here's another opportunity. It happens, we've got quiet access times for you to order your lunch, or if you want to be part of the hustle and bustle, well, here's the said line. So again, it is just about looking at the value of the child and what needs are there, and making sure that we're actually ticking the needs off so that they can get value out of their education. Value over volume.
Brent Passchier, thank you for being part of Around the School Table.
Thanks for the opportunity.